right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 187 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I am one of your co-hosts, Billy Bob. I'm on the West Coast. It's 9 a.m. I've got my other co-host, Ian Kummer, streaming live from a suburb in Moscow. It is 8 p.m. in Moscow. Our special guest today, Indi, returns streaming live from Sri Lanka, where it is 10:30 p.m. So thank you so much, Indi, for staying up and joining us. I really was excited to discuss your most recent article, and you've had a couple articles about the whole Epstein thing, the Epstein cover-up, whatever we want to call it. And so I know me and Ian have read your article and really enjoyed it and appreciated it. And it's linked in the comment section below this video. So Epstein, I mean, it's a big ongoing topic. I mean, we've known Epstein for decades, and then recently, with his alleged death, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that he was switched out and he's still alive. And now, just recently, we're having this drip of Epstein files, and it's weird because there doesn't seem to be any real effort to hold anyone accountable or to bring anyone to justice. And so I want to know, what to make of all of this. And I'm liable to throw it to Ian and put Ian on the spot and have him explain it. But
well, why don't we start? Well, since we linked Indi's blog post about it, and it's linked, and it's linked in the description of this video. His blog post, which has the same title, Epstein didn't kill himself, sweater edition. And I'm in there's no.
So
I
think the basic principle is they seem to have whacked the guy, right, and then taken control of his blackmail stash, and they're just using it. Nobody's being charged, and they're just releasing it out there. And if you're about my age, you've gone through I don't know how many scandals or how many even just big protest movements or how many leaks in American politics, and nothing happens. And at this point, you have to conclude that it's almost like a hazing event. And there's that line in The Big Short where it's they're not confessing, they're bragging. They're putting the stuff out there. Nobody's being charged. And they're just kind of getting you used to it. And then this is the new normal now. Your government is run by pedophiles and sex traffickers, and what are you going to do about it? And then when people don't do anything, they accept it. And then that goes on and becomes the new normal. Because nothing's actually happening here. And I've seen this happen so many times, as have you guys. Nothing happened after the BLM things. After WikiLeaks, nothing happened. Now they just regularly kill journalists. Me Too, they got a black Bill Cosby, and a Jew, Harvey Weinstein. But Bill Clinton continued dirty dicking it, since I was a child. This is what they're really doing, is just putting stuff out there. People talk about it, they act outraged for a while, and then it just becomes normal. And they just keep lowering the bar. It used to be they were abusing interns, but at least adult women. Now they're abusing children. I don't know how much lower they can go, but they'll keep going. And people just keep accepting it. I think we're in guillotine territory, not angry tweet territory. That's how. And if you read the American Constitution, or the Declaration, really, they say when your rulers become abusive and usurpative, or whatever that word is, you're supposed to overthrow them. So I think we're well into that phase of American politics.
I mean, if even a fraction of the Epstein files are true, any rational society would immediately darken every lamppost in Washington, D.C., with a body, ideally. But, that's just, the American public, man, it's
they have a lot of revolutionary mythos, but it's really the least revolutionary people.
For sure. And you could say it's because we're the most placated, because, after World War II, we accounted for half the global economy and only 5% of the population. And so they were able to really, placate people, invest heavily in this indoctrination apparatus, the propaganda apparatus, and just really structure people's minds in a way that keeps them from ever, even considering overthrowing the pedophile elite. So this
Yeah,
guy,
I mean, they were placated. Now you could say they're opiated. Like,
okay.
Epstein is 100% alive in Tel Aviv. So look, whatever happened, we don't know. So they've lost the physical chain of custody of the body. So in whatever was released, I think Wired did a report, and there's 2 minutes 53 seconds just missing. And like, this is supposedly high security prison. You have to assume that the security cameras would work. I actually have like a sort of personal example about how they do this, actually, if you want. Like, a relative of ours was killed in Sri Lanka. So they were like called to a meeting. This was back like when we'd overthrown the government, but we hadn't elected another government. So there was this weird sort of IMF administration running us for the capitalists. So it was a really like corrupt government. And he was murdered in a cemetery. He was called there for a meeting. I don't know why he went, but he was murdered in a cemetery. And I've gone to that cemetery a lot, and it's always full of people, but the security company had pulled all the guards on that day. And I was there when the cops were investigating. We had those meetings at our house, and they were trying to first they were trying to frame his wife, and then they tried to frame him as committing suicide. So I'm highly suspicious if a government who has physical custody of someone says that they committed suicide, because that's the easiest guy to frame, right? Is the dead guy.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know, and the idea that he was switched out, and so there's this photo, of course, going around, showing him with 2 bodyguards in Tel Aviv, and he's got a full beard and hair's a little bit longer, and it's quite possible. I mean, that could be him. We don't know, and it doesn't really change much, right? I mean, he's alive, he's not alive. Like, what's the difference? We still know there's a huge cover up. We still know that it's a bipartisan Western ruling establishment. It's like it's not just the U.S. political class, it's the European political class, and they're not going to hold themselves accountable. Like, they have no interest in prosecuting anyone or holding themselves accountable. And it looks like they could be interested in vindicating the people most responsible, like Epstein, if he is really alive. But yeah, why does the American public, why do they tolerate it? Like, why do they just accept it? How come, we have this reality and yet there's no accountability? Like, how did they create this reality where there is no accountability, where they are literally unaccountable in what is supposedly a representative democracy? Good luck.
I mean, if you go back in American history, like, what's happening isn't crazy unusual. Like, Christopher Columbus, in his logs and in the people around him, their logs, they trafficked young native girls. There's some pretty horrific stuff in there. There's one where Christopher Columbus gives a young girl to someone, and this guy writes in his diary, she scratched him with his nails, but then I whipped her until she made like noises you couldn't imagine. And then what the quote was, we later came to such terms that you would think she'd been educated in a school for whores. So this is like a young native child. That rape was always happening. Rape of slaves was always happening, I would assume, of indentured servants like Irish and whoever they brought over. It's just like it's Epstein Island is nothing new. America has been Epstein Island since Columbus landed in Hispaniola, or whatever you call it. Maybe what's new is now they're just like raping white girls, and so that seems to cause extra problems. But it's been a rape culture. I mean, they raped the land. It's been a rape culture from the beginning.
And they do seem like they're just kind of bragging about it now. They're not trying to hide it, really. And
I think they seeded this. So if you're familiar with QAnon, I used to have some friends around here who are into QAnon. They perhaps not coincidentally they had the best weed, but there's a QAnon belief system where there are pedophile elites like running out of a pizza parlor, and Donald Trump is actually fighting them. And then I remember at the time thinking like, man, like, this is stupid. Like, this sounds stupid. So I think they really, and that was just one guy posting on like, I think 4chan and other places. There was like one person Q posting this out there. And it made this whole thing seem like a conspiracy theory. So that when it does come out, you almost like feel or sound a bit stupid saying the truth. Because like such idiots had been like, I don't want to say idiots, these are like my friends, but it was because it seemed so silly before, right? The idea of the world being run by pedophile elites, they made it seem crazy. So it's kind of, I think it's a very cunning way of putting the truth out there through lies and kind of slowly inoculating people, getting people used to the fact of what's going to come out. And so now when it comes out, you sound crazy talking about it, but the truth is weirder than fiction.
Well, the QAnon, well, the thing about QAnon too is a lot of it turned out to be right. I mean, even though they did kind of put Trump on a pedestal, which I don't think there's really any basis for them to do that. But a lot of it, like even just that guy who showed up with a gun to a pizza parlor, like hence, and I just remember all of the media articles say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory that pizza is a code word, for child abuse, and anyone who thinks that is an idiot.
But that is a code word for child abuse.
Right. And now all these years later, it's openly admitted that was true all along. It is a code word. And they're all like, and even like, I remember like there's even that pizza parlor itself was weird. Like they're talking about how like, you need to bet, this closed password protected server, back into the website. And it's just like, so even that story seems like, well, what was going on at that location. So
you don't have to go to pizza parlors, right? This is happening at like Harvard, MIT, like New York. It's quite public. Like Davos, God knows, like the prostitution and trafficking that goes on, like when they're flying down there.
Well, I think when it comes to the way what led up to it, my personal belief that I've said on this show before actually is I don't think Trump himself was implicated in it. And the reason why is because, well, one, he made such a huge deal out of it in his campaign. It's like, why would you make a huge deal of something that you yourself are implicated in? And also, I just think when he came, especially the second, because I think the first time he was really not in charge of his own administration. I think that's very clear. He was tweeting, and that was it. Everybody afterwards kind of admitted they were just ignoring him. So this time,
he was like a dog who caught a car.
Right, dog going after a car. And this time, I do think he got sat down. Probably even before his inauguration, because you have those couple of months where you're eased into the White House, you get these classified briefings and all that even before you're inaugurated. And I think he just got told, we can't let that stuff out because it's terrible. So he was sitting on it. He was sitting on it. Administration was sitting on it. They did that. We released 50 documents that are completely blacked out pages. And then there was this act of Congress actually passing legislation to forcibly release all the files. Now that's interesting, but I think at the same time that was deliberate because as a bunch of commentators have already, people who looked at the documents have already pointed out, there's a lot of stuff that's clearly nonsense in it. There's a large fraction of it that's just not true because, when you have a federal investigation, anybody can write in, anybody can call, the tip line, anybody can write, a deranged email to the FBI saying, whatever. And, like every time there's a serial killer, like every time, they're looking for a serial killer, you have like 3 or 4 guys call in confessing to be the serial killer, which is obviously not true. So to me, as the consumer of this information, it's like, well, I didn't actually need to see those 6 million files. I don't, and it's also such a huge number. No one's even going to be able to process all that information, which is in of itself defense strategy. So you have 6 million files. A lot of it's garbage, and it's the presence of that garbage even discredits the rest of it. So that takes a lot of the sting out of it.
And Steve Bannon, who is in these like redacted files, they've been quite selective. Like Trump is definitely in there. There's video of him like partying with Epstein. Like Trump is one of the dirtiest dicks in Manhattan. But Steve Bannon has this line which is flood the zone with shit. It's not about like you just flood the zone with so much shit that people can't deal with it. It's quite effective.
Quite effective in ensuring that nobody is held accountable. Because like Ian was saying, you don't know what is real and what's not, and all of the fake stuff kind of discredits the entire thing. and then it's easy for the Justice Department to throw up their hands and say,
But
"Oh,
who in your lifetime has been held accountable for anything? Like
right."
I remember, so
Yeah.
as a kid, I grew up in America, and sort of I got non-consensually exposed to a lot of stuff I don't think kids should really be exposed to, like doing stuff with cigars and like vaginas. Like I learned about that when I was like 15, 16 from like the president. Like why should I be exposed to that? And then I remember Anita Hill, that was pretty bad, and like as kids we were just, that was in the news, like we couldn't get away from it, and everyone's gotten away with it over and over. So that's really like what's happening here. They're just, that's like nothing's happening. Nothing's happened with all of these scandals. The guys have kept going. Bill Clinton started with like Paula Jones, like everything from like in Arkansas. He had just scandal after scandal, and he's in this one also. So the lesson is, hey, look, we're just going to do this in front of you, and you're going to take it, and people do take it.
And like you explained in your article, it's a way of ensuring that, you know, these people continue to do what they're doing. They continue to serve the interests of the ruling establishment. So, you know, there was a whole,
I think it's like hazing. It's like hazing. So like David Cameron, the former prime minister, like I think put his dick in a pig or something, like a dead pig. And then he's doing that, and then the other people are watching that, and then that sort of binds them in some weird gross club. So when we watch all the Epstein stuff, just if we watched every other scandal, and then there aren't consequences, that sort of binds you into their like pedo gang society. It's a hazing ritual, right?
All kinds of precedents for that. I was going to mention the JFK assassination. I mean, you know, they literally killed the president of the United States, and they still haven't, you know, released those files. And then even more recent, there was the entire, isn't even going after the people that created the Russiagate hoax to destroy him. It's a bipartisan club, and you know, they don't want to expose their own dirty laundry to the public because, you know, they see themselves as a ruling class, and the disagreements that they have between themselves, you know, they're not going to get their ability to, you know, rule the rest of us. And so I think, you know, it would be easy for one side to tell on the other and then topple the whole thing and cause outrage. And so they don't want to do that.
But there aren't two sides, right? You can tell these guys are basically sharing the same STDs. It's the ruling circle is that tight. It's gross. But they're double dipping, man. It's like not good.
Well, it's kind of I mean, that's the other thing you touched upon. You both kind of touched upon. It's just we have these. You know, how do we have elites who are, you know, such losers? I mean, like Elon Musk. I mean, like there's Elon Musk. Like he was such a loser. He was trying to get into the party, and Epstein was like, nah. It was like blowing him off. Like, and Bill Gates allegedly catching an STD and trying to get Epstein to help him get, you know, medication to slip into his wife's.
And these guys who are supposedly so security conscious or whatever at Masters of the Universe, why are they doing all this over email? Like, what? Who sends that? There's people literally typing like this might have been illegal, or like, why would you type that? These guys just come off as.
Now they have the guys who own Google on their island, so they don't need to worry about that. But I mean, my point is, when you're a freaking billionaire, why do you need to go to this skeezy Jewish guy to get prostitute? If you're a billionaire and you're into certain things, you should be able to just get it yourself. What happened to this? You get, so it's like you get these guys who are worth, you know, billions or hundreds of billions of dollars, but they're still like these weird losers who don't know how the real world works, and they have to ask this pimp, you know, oh, you know, can I get a girl? You set me up with a girl? Like they sound like a bunch of stupid college kids. Like they're not who you would expect, you know, to be the masters of, you know, the world. The richest men in the world. It's cringy. It's embarrassing.
And they are untouchable, like Todd is mentioning here. So I'm not that familiar with Zorro Ranch. I assume it was part and parcel of their,
What he's
human
probably
trafficking.
referring to is that, so the deal with these, and the reason why they were trafficking these girls on private jets, it's not just because they're rich, but also because they don't have to log. It's different rules. There's laxer rules than with commercial flights. You don't have to log the passengers, all that information. You can pretty much just put whoever you want on those flights and flying
Yeah.
around with no record of it. So Zorro Ranch is allegedly one of the places that was sending a lot of these flights to Epstein Island, and allegedly during the first Trump administration, searches of that place had been blocked by someone in the Trump administration. So that's probably what Todd is referring to.
Yeah, and so he's saying like we can investigate it, like we can have the alleged leaders of the state could launch an investigation and hold people accountable, but that's exactly what's not happening. I wanted to contrast our leadership, our pedophilic elite, with Xi Jinping, right? So President Xi, as when he was growing up, he went into the rural areas of China, and he engaged in farming, and he got his hands dirty and was helping the peasants to earn a living and increase their productivity, and to really pull them out of poverty that China has been very successful at doing. And leaked CIA cables say that Xi Jinping is uncorruptible, right? He's a good guy. He's redder than red, as far as ideologically committed to, the working class. And so it's no wonder why the West, doesn't like China, because they have, it's like, they look in the mirror and they see themselves and they know what they are. And then they see real leadership and, someone who is genuinely interested in benefiting, the nation and the majority of the people in the nation. It's just night and day. Like, there's no such interest in the West. Like, the West couldn't care less about identifying the interests of the working class and putting an effort and working and investing and struggling and sacrificing to improve the lives of the American people, much less the Western Europe. So, this whole "Make America Great Again." I mean, what a goddamn bunch of fallacious bullshit, right? There's absolutely no interest in making America great, or the working class improving their lives. And so I think that's just important to consider the different natures of leadership. And I think the same can be said of Putin to a great extent, right? Like, I think there's a genuine concern there for the well-being of the Russian people, all of the Russian people. And he's not just an oligarch puppet, like we have in our country. So I don't know. That's an important, contextualization of the whole Epstein scandal, which really reveals the disgusting nature of the Western ruling class. And, when you juxtapose that with other countries' actual leadership and the rivals, the global rivals that the West sees as their rivals and as an enemy really to weaken, subvert, and destroy, because that's what they're saying they want to do with China. Anyway. What else? Yeah, go ahead.
With China, so China actually had a fork in the road where Bo Xilai, I'm not pronouncing that right, Bo Xilai was another contender to be the next leader. He was from Chongqing. And he seemed to be like pretty corrupt. And there was some wild case with, I think, his wife, and some guy got murdered. And I think like U.S. ambassador or someone was involved. Anyway, but Bo got like jailed. And then the Chinese Communist Party had a fair amount of, the Communist Party of China had a fair amount of like corruption, which she has cracked down on. quite dramatically, including like, and they rounded up every guy who was a CIA agent as well. They managed to like clear the CIA network in China as well. This happened over the past, I think, 10, 15 years. Um, yeah, that's the one thing America fights against everywhere. What I find interesting though is like last century, the rise of the Soviet Union kind of put pressure. What some people say is that because of the USSR was showing this way of life, they couldn't just like flog the workers here. They had to have the New Deal and they had to have some sort of response to that. But now, as you have China rising and people, even in America, are seeing that there's another way of life where maybe you like don't have to suffer all the time. There isn't a comparative response to sort of make life better for the working class in America. It's just circuses without the bread. It's just these media circuses, just like war after war and scandal after scandal. I feel like it's like the Roman Colosseum and they're just dragging out new people to be killed or like dragging out new sex acts to be observed. And then people get sort of distracted by that. But last century, you know, when there was a great power competition, Americans got some benefits from that. They got Social Security, they got like the GI Bill, and now they're just being told to eat shit. Like they're just being told, like, look, we're gonna like rape kids in front of you. Do you find this entertaining? And like, no, I think people are not entertained.
No, that's a great point, and it's very important to understand how a lot of the benefits, the golden age of capitalism in the 50s, with top marginal tax rates of like 90%. I mean, this isn't because of the benevolence of an oligarchy. It's because they were in an ideological competition with the Soviet Union, with communism, and they had to put forth this argument that capitalism is better for workers. And so they went to great extent to placate workers and show them how great life is. Now, since 1970, the economic security of the median household has been stagnant or declined, right? And meanwhile, in China, worker wages have tripled every 10 years for the past like 40 years. The wages are tripling for workers in China. Now, of course, China their starting point was really low, right? And so they have a long way to go before they reach, the income levels that we have in the West. But you see the trajectory, and whereas the United States has just been stagnant as far as the bread. We talk about bread and circuses, and the bread is non-existent because, it's no better than it was 40, 50 years ago. But the circuses seem to have gotten more salacious and more provocative, right? I mean,
people in China already live better than the US. And even within what I call the whole white empire, so US, Europe, all those guys, like I don't know if this is unusual, but at the periphery, people live better than at the core. Like Americans kind of like live like shit. I think you could say this. I was talking to some people from Texas, and they had a household income of like $300,000, right? Which is probably like a factor of 50 to it's like hundreds of times more than people make here. And they're trying to figure out if they can have one kid. They just want to have one kid. Just so they don't. You have a lot of money, but it all blows out. Like it's kind of like it's a fugazi. So you increase, like the fastest growing thing in the US, or the one place people that have jobs still, is I think like healthcare. But that's just, it's like measuring your cancer and saying that you're getting like really swole. Like, oh, I'm like gaining weight, I'm gaining muscle. But no, it's just you're measuring cancer. So when you measure US incomes, like say the US military budgets, we're like, oh, we have a 1.5 trillion. Okay, that's corruption. You're just measuring corruption. It doesn't measure outcomes. Yeah. So in Russia, they measure like outcomes. So the Russian military looks weaker than the US because it spends less money, but that's not true. You can see that on the battlefield. They can produce more artillery, they can produce more everything. So the US is just measuring corruption and calling it a military budget. They're measuring corruption in their society and they're calling it GDP. But actually they live worse not only than China and not only the people of like lower incomes in even places like Sri Lanka, but they live worse than even the peripheries of their empire. Like they're paying for Israelis to live better than them. They're like Europeans live better than them.
And then, I mean, the other thing is, and even if that's true, I mean, even if you're just comparing material metrics, but there's also like a quality of life. There's a happiness index, and
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's one of the worst aspects of U.S. society is like just the alienation and the lack of security and the hatred towards everybody, the competition, like, and then you have mass psychotropic medication addiction, not addiction, but I mean people are just prescribed it just to cope and get through the day. Like that can't be a healthy society. And then we talk about the illicit drug abuse, illicit drug addiction, the fentanyl crisis, and the mass shooting epidemics.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, so when we're talking about Epstein and sort of the desensitization, there's a commenter who said after Sandy Hook, he said, I knew it was over after then. Because when we did nothing about them killing children in schools, I knew there was like nothing left. Like, and he said that was the bottom. And I think about that because, yeah, after that, like after you kill your own children in schools, right? It's not even like trafficked children, like orphans, like lost girls. These are like your own children, and I think it was like around Boston. And then you didn't do anything about that. So then I feel like maybe that was the floor, and now they're just adding new basements to it.
Well, the USA used to have more guns, but almost no school shootings also.
I remember when the school shooting started. I remember when Columbine happened. So I was in school in America, and I remember after that, all of a sudden there were guards at the school. And I remember when Columbine happened, I thought, that's crazy. Like, that's never going to happen again. And now it happens like every week.
Really?
I never, like growing up in America, I never thought that would become normal. But so all these things, all this media outrage, even the expression of outrage towards it, you're just sort of setting the stage for the new normal because you're just talking about it and you're not like guillotining anybody.
Well, I think it's important to, I always try and contextualize everything within the reality of class. And I think, for the ruling class, like they don't see any problems. Like they're not getting shot. Why, things are pretty good for them and their class. Like if you look at, spreadsheets, like they continue to capture like a ridiculous amount of the increase in the total pie, right? So as the economy expands, the richest 1% is capturing more of that increase than the poorest 99%. And so to them, like everything is great, everything is fine, and their job is to continue it, to maintain the status quo, and to keep the people from being able to become an obstacle to change things or to improve things, and so that's what's going on. Like it could not be better for them, and their only task, their only concern is that the working class majority comes together and demands improvement. And if they can keep that from happening, man, this could go on for a fucking millennia. What the fuck? They don't care. So I don't know. From their perspective, there is no problem, and they're winning. They are winning big time. Now, China's a problem. Russia's a problem. Iran's going to be a problem. And these are kind of intractable problems because, Iran can really cause problems for them, right? They can, cause economic problems with the global economy. Russia's a big problem. Like, how do you solve that issue? And then, of course, China is the biggest of all problems. From my perspective, when I try and look at the world through their eyes, China is the biggest of all problems. So so that's their struggle. They've really got it won domestically. They've got the American people exactly where they need us to be. Stupid, ignorant. I see I froze. I wonder if I'm dropping out. Okay.
I can hear.
So, that's from when I try and figure out their perspective, I see that domestically they have everything exactly how they want it. There's no dissent. They can act with impunity. They have no concern of ever being held accountable for their innumerable crimes. Now the question is, how do we deal with these powers outside of powers around the planet? So Iran, Russia, and China. Do we want to talk about that, because that's always fun for me, or we can not?
Well, I want to address that. Living in a capitalist country, right? So, regardless of where you are, living in a strong nation state has benefits, right? Because you can argue some systems are better than others, some are more egalitarian than others, but in general, being in a strong state has benefits. Living in USA has benefits. Living in Germany at the height of its power had benefits. Living in the British Empire had benefits, as a British citizen, or the Netherlands or wherever. I think, starting earlier than that, but really, becoming very mask off at the end of the Cold War. These really aren't even nation states anymore, because a nation state as a nation, and you're kind of like, okay, we're kind of beholden, the elites, everybody in it is part of that nation. There's this kind of collective entity that you're all a part of. You're not actively working against yourself. You're not sitting there and saying, I want to make sure my children do not have, a country. No one says that. But what we're seeing, Rockefellers, any of those famous, Gilded Age billionaires, none of them, were sitting around thinking, how can I screw over future generations of Americans? No one, I don't think any of those guys, even if they're greedy, even if they're brutal towards strikes, they didn't really think that way. But I think now we have these guys like Bezos. There's this viral tweet from an Amazon employee. He was probably making six figures a year, a senior manager in one of their IT departments, and he was saying how he's talking about this round of layoffs Amazon just did, and he said, in my department, the Americans were laid off, were fired, and the H-1B visa workers were retained, and the amazing part is Amazon's going to ask for more H-1B visa workers after firing their American. So basically, there's almost no American employee. Amazon's one of the largest American companies, but employs almost no Americans at this point. I don't think it's even inaccurate at this point to say that our elites consider us enemies.
Yeah.
Their own people are enemies. And they say, well, if we get these people from abroad who are desperate and will obey us because they're scared of being deported, back from wherever they came from, they'll obey us and not ask for higher pay.
Yeah.
We can replace these people with it's very.
There's something similar that happened in the Roman Empire, where they were fighting all these sort of like wars of conquest.
Mm-hmm.
So like guys would get taken off their land to go and fight, I don't know, France or whatever. And then when they came back, they found that their like landlords had brought in slaves to work the land. So then they were pushed out. There's this weird thing with imperialism where it doesn't like. I want to hate Britain because they colonized us. But then when I read about how British people lived during that time, I'm like, man, you guys lived like shit. Like you were sending your children down coal mines, Like we suffered from neglect and just like abuse, but they sent their own children into like workhouses and stuff. Like imperialism, it's I'm sure Lenin has talked about this, but it's like a cancerous elite, and you see all these rich guys, right? And you can see it on Epstein Island. There's Muslims there, there's like Jews, there's Christians, there's people from all different countries. They all get together and they're unite around being rich. They're not divided on the stuff that they tell everybody else to be divided around. They're not divided by that. And I've seen that. Like rich people are like birds of a feather. They're united around being rich. But everybody else at the lower classes, they want you divided around like, oh, what's your
Yeah.
visa status? What's your race? Like, where are you from? Like, what do you? It's just it's all bullshit. But you go to those higher circles of power, and they're not even like really American. They live in some other world.
Yeah. No, they have their private islands in Fiji and all around the world where they hang out. So, and then they push this liberalism on us, and the liberalism is the thing that is, not reality based. So the reality is what you just described. It's a class based loyalty. They have a class based perspective. But liberalism teaches everyone that, it's nationalism. We're allegiant. We have allegiance to our nation, and the people of that nation. And so that's what they indoctrinate the working class with, this nationalism. But in reality, there is no nationalism. In reality, decisions are not being made based on a national interest, based on a rational preponderance of what is in the national interest of our sovereign country. That's just not how it is. It's based on a class, like what is best for the Western elite, for the Western ruling ship class. What foreign strategies do we need to pursue, and what domestic policies do we need to pursue? And so, what you just said kind of just demonstrates that. But again, you have the working class just thinking in terms that are totally detached from reality, and this "Make America Great Again," as if the current administration regime, Trump regime is concerned with improving the working class, the situation of the working class. It's laughable. You guys are avoiding. Go ahead.
Like, I understand the appeal of Trump, even like QAnon. So when I talk to QAnon guys, they at least recognize that something is wrong. They recognize that something is seriously wrong. You talk to liberals, and their thing is, oh, like, nothing's seriously wrong. We just need to like do liberalism better.
It's just Trump. Trump's the problem.
No.
That's
yeah, or just Trump. But then, like, what Trump appeals to is people did want someone to go in and like really change stuff, and he has really changed stuff, just the wrong stuff. But they wanted someone to come in and shake stuff up because it hasn't been working for a long time. It hasn't been working definitely since the 70s.
Well, I think that's the most important point on this show so far, that the difference between I broaden that to say right wingers and liberals, even a lot of leftists too. Not Marxist Leninists, not a few select groups, and outside the USA it's different, of course. But in the USA, most leftists, most liberals, at least right wingers will acknowledge, yeah, there's a problem. You might ask them, well, how do we fix it? You might have a completely retarded solution to it, or no solution at all, but he will sit there and know there's a problem, because a right winger has eyes and ears. He can look around him and say, wow, the country is shit. Everything is going to shit. As a normal human with 2 brain cells, he can determine there's a problem. But you talk to a liberal, you're like, he will sit there, like you said, and deny that there's anything wrong. And
if you talk to a liberal, they're like, be gayer. I'm like, well, I mean, you can do that in your own time. But what's it going to do about like actual people's working people's problems? Like, none of that's going to, or like change words, or like paint a sidewalk like a rainbow color. Like, what are you fucking talking about? Like they have nothing to address the material concerns of people. But the sad thing is the America's all right wing, but the American right wing has no material solutions either. Like, they're also just plump up the same asset holding class.
The thing I hate, this. I was talking to a friend of mine from Macedonia a little while ago, and we both kind of realized we hated the same thing. These signs these protesters hold up that say, if Kamala Harris were president, we would be at brunch right now. I hate that. So it's like, all of the problems, all the wars, all the genocides, the economic problems, all of this shit, you would still be at home, watching your slop shows on TV. But what got you to protest is because, your favorite neoliberal woman lost the, that was the straw that broke the camel's
back. Or that No Kings movement. I was like, if America had kings, you would have abolished slavery earlier. Like, the problem is, like, this is happening under yours. The problem is not kings. Like, you don't have a king. This is happening under your normal system of government. It's just all these ideas that the system is salvageable in a way that just involves like changing your mindset and not changing anything else.
Okay, I have two sort of points I'm going to try and get to. Probably not, but okay. My first point, I wanted to share a video I saw. I think it was in Britain, and it was a Ring doorbell video. It seemed legit. Sometimes you can act those out, but I think this was legit. This white British woman knocked on the door and was complaining. It sounded like an Indian kind of immigrant living in Britain, but he had purchased a BYD car from China. And the lady just knocked on his door and was very unhappy with him for purchasing BYD because China is evil and you're just helping China spy, on Britons. And so she was just really out of her mind. And, I think the takeaway from that was that, the Western Empire, the ruling Western establishment uses its propaganda apparatus to spread mental illness, really. And this is their approach to maintaining power. Like, if all the people are mentally ill, but they can go to work and make our widgets, like, we have nothing to worry about because they will never be able to understand reality or get their shit together or organize in a way that's ever going to threaten us. And so if they can just spread mental illness, that's their winning strategy, at least with the domestic population. Of course, thank goodness we touched on it earlier, how China has kind of put in the Great Chinese Firewall. China has, really removed the CIA networks and these orgs, these NGOs, from their society. And so they've kind of, made themselves impervious from this indoctrination apparatus. And I think Russia has done the same thing and Iran has done the same thing, or they're working on it. But domestically, they have just spread so much confusion and ignorance. And this is how they win. This is how they win the class struggle and make sure that we don't ever hold them accountable. I had the second point. It's totally escaped me. I don't remember what my second point was, but I know Dust wanted to weigh in here, saying the best way we can fight back is united as an international proletariat for all workers here while opposing imperialist policy abroad. I mean, I don't think anybody.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
Yes. Yeah. So I'm also like anti-immigration. I think it's in Sri Lanka, we see it as in people immigrate. They don't actually live that good anymore. And then their parents here like sort of die alone. And culturally for us, that's like a real problem. And like immigration it's some happy story of going for a better life. Like it's actually like very traumatic and bad and like weird. We shouldn't be flying all across the world to like do what? Like we should be able to like live in our own countries. I think you got to treat people decently wherever they are. I don't think America has the right to concentration camp anybody there. But I'm also anti-immigration. I think it's bad. And I think, what was that comment? Could you bring that up again if you don't mind? He was saying, yeah. So what I say, I think if you look at it historically, America, when it was being colonized, they had an indentured servitude program. And I think that was like 7 years or whatever. And then you kind of like worked. That's what these international students and what a lot of these visas are. They bring us in and then we're just indentured servants. So you're bonded to an employer and you depend on them for everything.
You got to behave and you got to accept wages that are much, much lower than.
And you definitely can't organize. The minute you start organizing, and I think like slavery, that never went away. They still use prison populations, and like illegal immigrants can you can do whatever you want to them. So I don't think America's really changed that much, right? Even we say, oh, the ruling elites have become so depraved. I mean, they were always pretty depraved. Like George Washington had someone else's teeth. He had slave teeth. And Thomas Jefferson, I don't know, you can't really call Sally Hemings a consensual relationship. And even in his lifetime, he never freed his own children. They were always doing like horrid shit. I think maybe what has changed is there used to be this layer of hypocrisy over America, which made it look like, I used to say, well, America's bad, but they're getting better. And now you can't say that anymore. Now they're just like, now what's happening is they're just saying we're bad and fuck you. They used to, even in an abusive relationship, sometimes the abuser will take the trouble to lie to you and they're just not doing that anymore, which I find interesting. I think Billy Bob, you were saying they're getting away with it. I don't know. I think they're closing up shop. I think when this AI bubble pops, I think that'll be the greatest depression, I think what I'm starting to call for now is I think the United States needs to break apart. And I think people within the United States need to form Marxist militias. And as is your right in America, it's not our right here, but as is your right in America, I think you need to break that shit up. And America has the foundational system for that. And I think that's the best thing you could do to help the world as an American, is to destroy America.
So I also see some kind of huge global economic collapse on the horizon. A big event. Like, I kind of just feel like this is the calm before the storm. We're like, 1935, 1936 is like kind of the time we're living in. But I don't know. Like, I could be wrong, and I'm open to alternative perspectives. Like, maybe the status quo can go indefinitely. But I think with, the economic insecurity and the precariousness, and then the need to destroy China, the need to destroy Russia, the need to destroy Iran, like, they're just going to push things to the brink. But that could just be catastrophizing. I could just be,
So they've lost China. They've lost any chance of China. They're losing to Russia. Iran, we don't know, but it's unlikely that they can destroy Iran. But I mean, there's nukes pointed at them,
causing tremendous global upheaval.
And I've noticed that one thing that Trump. So I remember during COVID, people were dying, and obviously Trump's not doing anything. But then I remember when the stock market started going down, and then reacted. Like, the minute the stock market goes down, they will react. That's what they live in. They're not really human, right? They're just like placeholders for corporations.
Well, and that's why Trump is stuck, because he understands that an attack against Iran is going to hurt the stock market, and so that's why he didn't do it. That's why the West hasn't done it. 30 years ago was because.
And if you want to talk about Iran, actually, so I think maybe what your audience is, I think maybe what Americans don't understand is how in the last 20 years, Qatar and UAE have become sort of the fulcrum for a lot of the world. So we take every flight through Qatar or Dubai. So does like Africa, and I'm not sure, I think even China when they're going that way. Like, so it's become, so my wife is flying through Qatar right now. So if war were to pop off right now, Straits of Hormuz close, oil, whatever, but lots of things are going to shut down. Like, lots of things. Everybody is moving through Qatar, which is right next to a U.S. military base. The civilian airport is right next to a U.S. military base. So there'll just be huge, huge knock-on effects. I mean, obviously with COVID, we've seen that you can just shut everything down, and then somehow things will keep operating. I wouldn't have imagined that. But there would be huge, huge knock-on effects beyond oil, which people do have stockpiled.
So I would like to catch up on a few things that were said so far. So first,
I saw that.
Comment. I did not watch a video, but the porch video, the doorbell video of the British woman harassing the Indian guy about his Chinese car. I think that's really, it's really interesting, because that mirrors my experience with British people, because they're so insufferably progressive. Like, they look down their noses at those racist Yanks and just those racist Russians or blah, blah. They're so insufferably progressive. They're just helping the world. Because, Britain is like the best place on earth, and everybody wants to immigrate to Britain, and they're just so insufferable about it. But at the same time, it's like, I've noticed they have like a negative racial stereotype about like almost every other group on earth. Like, you can almost say one, right? Like, China, there are these weird collectivist slave race guys who eat bats. Russians are slave race. They have this weird and specific stereotype of every group, and they also have these really emotional responses to stuff their media told them, like the Chinese car, because China is like, everybody because Britain is the best place on earth. Everybody wants to hurt Britain, so like they have this idea that there's a Russian spy under every rock, that China is hurting British industry. So that's the stuff they get upset about. But at the same time, like the actual problems. I mean, I've seen, those street videos of London. They're just an embarrassment. I think there's literal war zones in the Middle East that look better than London. Like not even like an exaggeration. Or just the problems they have with law and order. Just like last year, almost 20,000 British girls and young women were trafficked through the rape gangs. So it's just like they have these huge, massive organized crime problems, massive poverty problems. I mean, the fact that thousands of their pensioners freeze to death every year. And like they don't care about it. Like you ask a British person about this, they don't even care about it. They're like, you ask them about the grooming gangs or about the fact that people freeze to death in their apartments every year, or the knife crime. They don't even get upset about it. But the Chinese car in your street is part of the Chinese conspiracy to take over Britain.
So all that's left now is they're saying, okay, things are bad, but China's worse, or things are bad, but Russia's worse. That's all they have left. Just this made-up idea of Russia or China or like Iran or anywhere, which is really kind of disappears if you knew anything about these places. But these people are the most propagandized people in the world. And yes, I also find British people insufferable. I was talking to a British guy and I told him like the most celebrated holiday in the world is like basically Britain fucking off. Like, and he was like, no, it's Christmas. And I was like, bro, just like think. Like, just go through like the top like 2 populated places in the world and see how much Christmas you're getting. Like, they just don't know, and yet they think they know everything. And I end up going to England a lot, sort of non-consensually, because my wife is there. And every time I go back, it gets worse. So my daughter and I had to get they were having train strikes. And so we had to run to the train, and then we ended up sitting on the floor of the train. And I was like, we could do this in Sri Lanka. And in Sri Lanka, people would like share food, and it'd be like a bit more fun. Like, and then my friend migrated from Sri Lanka after a long time, and he was unhappy here. And then when he went, then they started having these sort of like race riots in England. And he's like, what the fuck did I leave for? Now it's like here. I feel bad for the wave of people who are migrating now, because there was a point where if you migrated, it was a better life because things like were hella fucked up here. But now when you migrate, it's like a worse life. Like I feel bad.
That's an important point.
There's a saying I've seen some guy I argue with all the time on Quora, and I disagree with him on almost everything, but he said, parts of growing up is not wanting to immigrate to the USA anymore. I think that's absolutely true. But part of growing up and like is getting past the propaganda and seeing that there's no reason you should emigrate to the USA. And the next thing I wanted to catch up on was, of course, that comment about visas.
Here's a follow-up.
Sorry. That being on a visa is worse than being undocumented. Well, you know what's worse than being undocumented or being on a visa? It's being one of those guys with $150,000 in student loans, getting fired by a visa dude. I'm sorry. It's very much a scam. It's not different. It's not.
And that's by design, right? Like, I mean, in the Nixon era, they figured out that, hey, all these guys with an education are protesting. Why do we make them debt slaves? And then they can't protest.
A really funny game to play. I was playing this game the other day. Is asking questions about immigration to ChatGPT or any of the LLMs, right? So like I would ask it. It's like, hey, why were there so many Chinese workers building American railroads? And like you can see how like the algorithm is like struggling to be politically correct. Oh, because the Chinese love. It was like they love to work.
They love it.
They just love work, and they'll accept lower wages. And like it's like you can see it like it's programming struggle to be politically correct to just say they wanted people
to exploit,
right. And like, or ask it, why was it that black people didn't want to work on the railroads but Chinese people were? And like it's struggling, like people who were literally slaves didn't want a railroad job, so they had to find Chinese people. It's incredible. And yeah, you're right. I think you're right. Things have not changed. That principle has not changed of, when workers start getting uppity and wanting
And
stuff
America's still a
overnight.
colony. Like it
Yeah,
needs colonizers. It needs fresh blood. And if you look at all
mhm.
the tech companies, right, they end up giving it to like guys like me, like guys from Chennai or whatever, to run, so they can go to like Rape Island. So there's never been a better custodian of white empire than a brown guy. Like the British people, like Indians, like administered the British Empire. Like the VO, like the British East India Company didn't actually have that many guys there. It was people like me doing the paperwork, and then people like me putting down the rebellions and so on. It's yeah, we're still doing it.
You read essays by George Orwell, like Shooting an Elephant, or some of his other essays about
Yeah, I've read that.
being a British person, in the colonies. He directly said that the Englishmen are vastly outnumbered. They're like 1% of the population, if that. The locals could,
But what they
kill
did, right? So there was a big rebellion in India in the 1850s, and what they did was they put it down with Nepalis, or they put it down with people from other parts of the empire. So what they do is they just move people around. Even Israel is like that. You're getting European Jews, you're deporting them from Europe because the Germans didn't want to resettle them, and America didn't want to take them, and Britain didn't want to take them. So you deport them to the final ghetto in Israel where they'll fight other people for you. In Sri Lanka, when like Sinhalese people wouldn't pick the tea, so they brought people from India to do it. So, and then these people have no natural connection, and then when things fall apart, then we fight each other. We fight each other along the same class level, really, like a poor Indian, poor Sri Lankan, like whatever. But we don't fight the guys on top. Any war but class war.
Well, I'm glad that quality of life is improving in Sri Lanka. There definitely was a time, like you said, when immigrants would come to the United States, they would have a better quality of life. And yeah, that's probably less and less of a
quality
thing.
of life. No. So after our financial crisis, like our society has really bifurcated, and like the poor are doing much worse, and the rich are doing much better, and the rich are doing better because we're part of like the sellout class. Like we're part of like that. Like you actually won't find people like more conservative and even anti-immigrant than like Sri Lankans who've like moved to Britain or somewhere. They're like, keep everybody else out. Like, so Sri Lanka's doing, but the thing is, let's take life expectancy. I think Sri Lanka's kind of equal with America now, and we'll kind of pass America, right? Because we don't, in the sense that America's going down. Yeah, America just has like long-term health issues now, weird health issues other people don't have, debts of despair that other people don't have. I think Americans maybe don't realize that other countries don't have blocks, which are just people doing hard drugs and being like and being insane like on the streets. That's not I think people have gotten weirdly normalized. Like that's become weirdly normal to Americans. And a friend of mine went to San Francisco, and he was scared, right?
Yeah.
And you were talking about London, like so we wear jewelry, but we don't in London. So things have gotten a bit screwy, I think.
It's funny actually that you brought that up because my now wife is Russian, and she's one of the people I would talk to on social media before I came to Russia.
Wait, excuse me, Snake? What did you?
What?
You said now wife?
Right. Yeah, my wife.
Yeah, congratulations. When did that happen?
Keeping all this important information from us.
I don't announce my personal life on social media.
Yeah, no, I understand. Anyway,
well, yeah, she's one of the people I was talking to on social media before I even came to Russia, because I was trying to meet Russian people on before I came to Russia. Anyways, I was talking to this woman on live on oh gosh, I guess we used Skype. That was when Skype still existed. Skype still existed 5 years ago. It doesn't now. But anyways, Skyping her, and it was morning for me. It was like early afternoon for me and late at night for her. And she's walking around this part. This is outside of Moscow proper, so it's not rural, but the street lighting is kind of hit or miss. It was very dark, so she was just out for a walk, and we were Skyping. And I made this comment that, it's probably not safe for you to be walking right now. And like, she looked at me like I was retarded. It's like, why wouldn't it be safe? And I've come to realize that it's actually not, that being in fear of your life, being in fear of someone attacking you or robbing you or killing you, like that poor Ukrainian girl on the train that was in the news. I mean, there's stuff like this, being constantly afraid of people hurting you because they're insane or on drugs or just feral. It's not a normal thing outside the USA. For most places, not everywhere, but most places outside the USA is not a normal feeling, and it's very shocking for Americans to leave the USA, even go to countries that are, per capita much poorer, have a lot less money. People living on $300-400 a month, but still, you're not living like that. And it's an incredible experience for us to see that and realize.
And I think it's not about poverty. It's about just the breakdown of social bonds. You get, because in all these psychological experiments that they made me study when I was in school, you have, like, say, rat populations or monkey populations where they're separated from their social world and they're basically put in jail together. And then that's kind of the basis of, like, Western psychology. But later when they go back and do some of those experiments, like the rat pushing a lever for cocaine experiment, but they have, like, the rat community there, as in their family, their social relations, their world, they're not pushing the lever for cocaine all the time. So a lot of basically the foundation of Western psychology is in, like, operant conditioning and so on. It was based on these, like, traumatized, atomized, essentially jailed animals. And that's kind of like what happens to Americans, right? Yeah. Like, even the process of colonization for Europeans would be traumatic. Those are people that had cultures, and you just go and you turn into, like, this melting pot. Okay, what does it make you? It makes you like a tool, like a cog in some rich man's or the capitalist machine. And then humans aren't meant to live like that. It's stressful and it's fearful. And then you get, like, in a village, you don't. So we were in Chicago. That was the last time I came to America. And every time we took the train, someone mentally ill would get on and, like, yell at us or make us afraid in some way. And that just wouldn't. And also, nobody around does anything either. So that just, in a country where you have social bonds, or in a smaller world, that doesn't happen. But where everybody is atomized, everybody's an individual, everybody's separated from their family, from their culture, from their land. And I say including white people, because I think white is really the destruction of a lot of other identities. Then you get all these pathologies.
Well, about the thing about people not doing anything, I want to address that too. The people are afraid. People are afraid.
Yeah. You should be afraid. Yeah.
Well, there's a term. I can't remember his name, but there's somebody. It was actually a while ago when the things weren't that bad. But in the 1990s, somebody coined the term anarcho-tyranny, and he defined. I know it's kind of it's not a correct use of the term anarchy or tyranny, but basically he defined anarcho-tyranny as a government that both fails to protect its citizens and also oppresses them. So there's a lot of cases, because it just wants people to be passive and afraid. So there was that very famous case. I think it was in Philadelphia. Daniel Penny, he had gotten into a fight with this homeless person who was on drugs, threatening to kill people. He hadn't intended, but the guy died. He hadn't intended to kill, but basically put him in a chokehold. He died. It was one of those, really tragic incidents. You're like, that person should have gotten help. He should have been institutionalized. That guy probably shouldn't have killed him, but he was, scared because he's threatening to kill everyone. And then so it's one of those cases of, it is better when you're on public transportation in the USA and someone's, being insane, you really just have to be small and
we just left. We just got off the train.
Try to leave or something. Yeah, it's unfortunately the nature of being an American.
Let's understand that. Sorry,
go ahead. I'm okay. So I wanted to focus on this idea of alienation. I wanted to focus on the ideologies that are shoved down our throats that kind of promote alienation. And I want to, because I just this morning, on social media, I'm arguing with these individualist types. And I think a lot of our problem is this fixation and this hyper focus on we are individuals and an anti-collectivism, which I think is destructive to our mental health. And I think there's a reason. If we understand the class dynamics, we can understand that, the ruling class obviously is interested in pushing individualism. This is a bourgeois concept because they don't want to be told what to do or held accountable. They want to be able to enjoy their wealth, enjoy their property in a society that they don't have to ever fear society saying, fuck you. Like, this is bullshit. Like we need common understanding of decency and rules and things like that. And so it's a concept that's rooted in wealth and privilege that resists and resents any kind of constraints. And this is what individualism is. Now, the poor people, the masses of people, we have no interest in fucking individualism. We want to be protected from the exploitation and stuff like that from the ownership class. And so, this anti-collectivism that has just permeated our society is really unhealthy, and it's really at the center of a lot of this, these mental health problems. And of course, like the ruling elites themselves, they can avoid these subways, Indy. They don't have to go on that subway and deal with the fucking result of their fucking sick society that they've created for generations and generations. They can avoid it. They take their private helicopters, Anyway, thanks for getting me angry.
No, I don't know if because that's what I always believed about Russia and China, and communism growing up, is that we are individualists and they are collectivists. For those of you who don't know, I am translating a biography of Stalin written in 1947. So it's a Stalinist book. It's before Khrushchev. It's really even before the American propaganda against Stalin really accelerated.
So it's a good one. It's a good one.
Right. So that's why I'm saying it's from it's like a time capsule from 1947, from a different time period. But, reading this book, and it really, reinforced my growing suspicion that, Russian culture, even under communism, was not collectivist, was never collectivist, like Soviet education, Soviet attitudes. Were never collectivists. They were always based on the individual. Like, they didn't do group graded projects. Like, even just the idea of a group graded projects, they never did. It's like, why would, from Soviet Russian.
Ian, you're going to start an argument with me.
Well, no,
I just think you have a liberal idea. You're projecting a liberal idea of collectivism. Collectivism and individualism are not on opposite ends of the spectrum. Stalin explained that collectivism is simply the individual combined. It's the combined interests of the individuals, and in opposition to the wealthy elites who when they exercise their individualism, causes problems for the collective. And so it's the individual interests of the collective that are combined. So they're not like opposite things, like individualism over here, collectivism over here. Like, I think that's not a correct way to perceive.
Well, see, you have read Stalin himself, and I have not. So it's actually interesting that you said that. Yes, because that's
I posted that argument under your post, and so you should have read it.
Well, where did you write it? Because I haven't seen it under my post.
No, on Facebook. No, I posted that a whole quote from Stalin underneath your post on collectivism.
Okay, well, that's right. You should post these comments on the blog because other people who read the actual chapter will see it.
No problem.
But yeah, no, that's good because yes, you're right. I'm operating on the Western definitions. It's that programming.
Seeing these things as opposites.
Yes, but everything is presented. Well, that's another thing I think it applies to your British lady and her Chinese car. It's all this stuff. These ideas aren't. Everything is presented as the opposite of another idea, which isn't actually true. Like, they say, collectivism is the opposite of individualism, or even like fascism is the opposite of, Soviet. It's like, okay, so just because even when two ideas or two peoples or two groups are in opposition, it doesn't make them opposites. if that makes sense. You know, we
Yeah.
love that black and white binary. This idea is the opposite of this idea.
Liberalism likes to take every concept, isolate it, silo it, and then examine it without any understanding of how it relates to everything else. And so Marxism takes the totality of everything and then tries to understand how different things relate. And it's just a totally more informative and more superior way of understanding than liberalism, which again, it's just designed to take people, disconnect them from the reality and how things actually relate to each other.
You know, never
Indi,
mind.
Go ahead.
Yes. Well, you know, it reminds me of, well, like a couple of days I was arguing with this guy. He commented, he replied to one of my posts, oh, you know, Iran just killed, 35,000 protesters. And I replied, well, okay, how do you know they get how would the people who say that even know? Because obviously the government's going to suppress that information. It's not even possible, even if you're a doctor in Iran, how can you even count how many protesters were killed? And there's no way to, even if it's true that they killed a lot of people, how could you possibly know the exact figure? And he said, well, you're an anti-Semite. And it's like,
Touche.
Right, you got me. You
win. And that's the mental illness, right? That's the mental illness, that if they spread this mental illness and keep people from being able to engage rationally and think correctly, they've won. And they have won, and that's the reality they've created. And we're just watching.
But I feel like there's like a big cognitive dissonance coming in now, because there was, for the average Westerner, there was this sense of moral superiority, like you were talking about British people and so on. There was a sense of moral superiority over other people. How do you do that when your leaders are like open pedophiles? I guess Catholics kept going after that was released, right?
China is worse. Because China is
worse. Yeah, I was reading this Eldridge Coldry book, like Strategy of Denial, and he didn't even, I hadn't gotten that far in it. He didn't even really bother to explain why China was worse. It was just taken as an assumption that, so all that's left is just kind of racism. Like, you're not Chinese or you're not Russian, and be happy for that. And that's it. It's just like, let them eat racism. Because what I find interesting is liberals are like, oh, we're like anti-racist. Ask them about Russia. Like, they're just wildly racist towards Russians. Just wildly, casually racist and disrespectful towards Russians. So they just have their own race that they like to beat up on. And they just like take turns. So they're like, oh no, we like protect Muslims or something, except they don't. But that's all that's left now. So does that have any material impact on the functioning of empire when you have no moral story anymore, not even a lie?
No, it's an experiment. It's an experiment, and we're going to see where it ends up. Go ahead, Ian. Sorry.
I compare, what you said about liberals and racism to like a man dying of thirst in the desert, because or just someone who's very sexually repressed, because the liberal knows it is bad to be racist, and he's scared to death of doing anything that could be even accidentally perceived as racist. He won't make any jokes or say any words that he's been told are racist. But if you give him a socially acceptable outlet for being racist, he will act like a man who's been, who hasn't drank anything for 3 weeks, seeing, a water hole. He'll just gorge himself on it. It's like you tell him, or like how, right at the beginning of the Ukraine war, they gave you some slurs, some ethnic slurs you're allowed to use, and liberals were just like man dying of thirst. They were just gorging themselves on it. Or China, they'll go on those Chinamen who eat bats. They won't say Chinamen, which is funny. They won't say the words Chinaman because that's racist. But they'll say Chinese people eat bats and are collectivist and don't think for themselves and are brainwashed. They'll use every ethnic stereotype and slur
They're
But
submissive, I think maybe is
yes, it's submissive. They're afraid of their government. They don't, or like how Koreans don't have a word. North Koreans, for some reason, only North Koreans, not South Koreans who speak the same language for some reason. North Koreans don't have a word for love. Yeah,
Huh.
that's a real.
I haven't heard that one. That's a good
Yes,
one.
North Koreans don't have a word for love. The Russians don't have a word for empathy, even though it's literally the same word. It's a Greek word, so yes, it's the same word in Russian as in English. Empathy, but they'll say that. They'll say. I mean, these people will. I have noticed that a lot of people, like especially these kind of expats and foreign groups who come to a monolingual country like the USA or Britain, and they just kind of assume they can say, they're kind of careful what they say, but they say it in a way that's difficult for the normal person to verify, even if you think, okay, that's kind of an extreme accusation, but there's no way I can prove it's wrong. And especially when it comes to other languages, you can just kind of say stuff like, because if you're just a normal person who speaks English, and I come to you and say, well, in Russian, there's no word for empathy. Well,
I'd believe you. Sounds
right,
like
okay, sure. Yeah, they're like, okay, sure, why not? The average person doesn't think about it, so they just say this stuff. And they really expect you to not question it. Like I remember there was a PhD. This was a PhD paper. So this was a woman who was doing her actual PhD, very highly educated woman doing her PhD thesis that I read. And she was talking about the Red Army in World War II. And this is the things she actually said in her paper, that the Soviet Union was sexist because they used masculine nouns for all of the job titles in their military.
Sounds legit.
Right, and she said, and this is this is internalized sexism, because I'd ask women from this period, because I guess this was like late 90s, early 2000s, when there's still a lot of war veterans who are alive, and she would ask women, and they would not understand what she was talking about. This proves internalized sexism. Well, now that I know more Russian, I can see, well, it's stupid, because they don't. It's not structured like in English. We have fireman, policeman. The word "man" in it is just it's actually like Spanish. You have a masculine.
I believe you mean fire person, Ian.
Fire person, right? Fire person and police
PC.
person. Right. So when English languages like Spanish or Russian, you have a masculine ending and a female ending, and the masculine ending is gender neutral. You could be a woman or a man doing that job. So it's just I'm sorry for the rambling, but yeah. So the point is they can say this stuff. They assume the average person won't question it. It's good for propaganda because you just repeat it, and most people don't know enough to.
Yeah, no, the lies are insidious. We live in a society based on lies, awash in lies, and I think this is the experiment that we're talking about. This is the human experiment, unlike anything we've ever seen before, and we see that it's not having the best results. With the mental health of your average American, the dependency on psych meds, the drug dependency, the mass shootings. We talked about it. Like, this is an experiment, and doesn't seem to be getting better.
Yeah, and I think, look, we can say that the American experiment has failed. And I think we talk about America needs to stop doing this, America's bad in this way, X and Y. What actually is going to stop them, right? They're not going to stop. What happens is the United States needs to be broken up. The United States needs to be broken up. And luckily the United States has well-established sort of, not legal, but let's say constitutional procedures for doing that. And I think we have to start applying pressure now within the states, and people within the states need to start moving to break up the United States. You have an obviously tyrannical and abusive federal government. It's causing hella problems, and the best thing you can do for us in other parts of the world is to, what Americans recommend for us all the time, which is to overthrow your government.
I mean, I see that happening two ways. Either the elites decide they need to do it for their own malign purposes, for whatever reason, or it just collapses, and then we have to just deal with that collapse. And as a part of that collapse, we're going to have, smaller regional countries. But I just, it's hard to imagine.
That weird. So there is that so one thing I say about Epstein is they're almost like ideologically 9/11ing themselves. So 9/11, they hit some of their own, through their agent Al Qaeda, like they hit some of their own stuff. Why would you do that? I've never quite understood that. But even now, it's almost like a controlled demolition. This is like, look, with the Epstein files, we're speaking about JFK. They still haven't released the JFK files. You don't have to release anything. They don't have to release anything. It doesn't matter if Congress approves something. America's in a completely post-constitutional state now, so they didn't have to do anything. There must be some. I guess they just at some level they don't care, and at some level, if you read some of the Epstein stuff, they talk about all this chaos in the world, and they're like, "Oh, this is a good investment opportunity, good profit opportunity." If you just have some information, they're making trades off this.
It seems unsustainable. It seems that it's one of the greatest reality TV shows in human history. The concern is it's just going to have a lot of negative externalities in the forms of, global economic collapse, misery, deaths, possible nuclear war. Although I do get a lot of pushback when I suggest that, Israel could use nukes against Iran because it's the only way they can turn them into Libya. And people push back and say, absolutely not. There's no way Israel's going to use.
Why absolutely not? Like they violated every other norm. Why not?
I'm picking a fight with Dust James again, because he was downplaying the idea that. But we're gonna have Dust on, and he can argue himself. So we won't argue against him when he's not here. But Indi, we really appreciate your contribution to our discussion. I would say this morning, but for you, it's getting almost midnight, right?
Yeah. It's almost bedtime for me.
So I'm glad. I hope your wife makes it home safe.
Yeah, she's on the way. She's fine, I think. And congratulations, Ian. It's always nice talking to you guys. You guys are different.
That's a nice thing to say, considering what the normal thing is here. It is.
It's always awkward when you freeze.
Okay. Dust is saying it is entirely as motivating as internal class and national contradictions. Okay, so he's not downplaying the possibility of a nuclear strike by Iran. I think it's possible. Again, I just think logistically that's the only way they can get what they want from Iran. They're not going to be able to take it over. They're not going to be able to destroy the government, but maybe using nuclear weapons, they'll turn it into Libya, just a failed state. So I think I
agree with Dust on this. So, and here's a conspiracy theory for both of you guys. What if
5 minutes, Ian? No more than 5 minutes.
It's not going to even take me 5 minutes. It'll take me under 1 minute. So what if Israel has the Epstein files and they've been, that Damascus sword over our heads, our political elites' heads. You have to do our bidding, or we will release the files. And then, the American establishment is looking at the situation in Iran. It's just like, it's not doable. We don't care what is, it's not realistic to go to war with Iran. The cost would be huge. It would just be a disaster to go to war with Iran. And what if this preemptive release of the Epstein files is a way to just neutralize whatever, just to neutralize leverage? What better way? Like, imagine you're being blackmailed, like, this affair you had or this embarrassing thing you did, I'll tell everyone you did it. Well, a really great way to preempt that blackmailer is just to tell everyone yourself in your own terms, right? And then
I think that's a very good point. I
think it's possible we did that because
that honestly makes the most sense. That makes the most sense. Because
I don't think Trump wants to go to war with Iran. I don't think the USA wants to spend. Like I think the Pentagon gave him those briefings, and it's just like it's not going to work out for us to do this. But there's a lot of pressure from Israel to do that. But we just and they've been jangling those those Epstein files.
Yeah, because Israel knows that this navy that can cover them is depreciating to dust.
Mm-hmm.
They know that America doesn't really produce THAAD missiles. Like America doesn't really produce. This is what Madeleine Albright, I think, said. It's a shame having this great army if you can't use it. And like the American armies, the military is not what it was during the Iraq War and so on. It's actually pretty shit. And they're not like building ships anymore. They're not replenishing even like basic artillery. So Israel must be like, well, we need to hit Iran now, like before our dad gets old.
Well, my dad can still beat up your dad, right? Right. It's there's a question from Todd. How does balkanizing America help anything? And I actually have to take his side. I mean, obviously, as an American, I don't want the USA to balkanize. I think also, well, there would be negative global consequences to that, and also,
America's got to go. Like the United States of America's got to go. The USSR didn't need to go, but the USA has got to go. There's no reconciling this. You can see with their elites, if they were ever to hold anybody, if they were ever to hold all the people in the Epstein files accountable, it would collapse their elites and social structure and everything. And so this is not like a redeemable country. This is not a redeemable society. The USA needs to get broken up.
It's the same thing because regime change and breaking up aren't the same thing.
So if you look at the structure of the United States, it's designed to break up. It's designed to break up into constituent states, and it should do that. And if you take their hypocrisy seriously, Jefferson said while they were putting down essentially like a poor person's, like a debtor's rebellion, I think Shays' rebellion, he said the tree of liberty needs to be watered from time to time with the blood of tyrants. Yeah, and the United States is like, if you even take their lies about themselves seriously, this is the time for an American revolution to destroy America.
It strikes me as interesting that I was so close to ending the show, and then we're having more. But I would argue with Todd. I would tell Todd that in lieu of the American people getting their shit together and holding people accountable, it's best for the humanity if the United States is balkanized. Obviously, the best case scenario was we have the USSA. I mean that's.
And I actually have a proposal. I think they should break it up based on college football leagues. So I think it should be the Big Ten, Pac-10, and I think that is actually what unifies Americans.
Well, the problem is if you don't have, you need a big gorilla in this corner of the world. I'm sorry, you do. If you have I'm all about the multi. I'm big on the idea of a multipolar world.
Yeah, it should be Mexico. I'm fine with Mexico.
Well, it's not going to be Mexico.
It should be Mexico and Brazil, but it can't be the USA, man. That shit is cooked. Like from the elites down, that shit is cooked.
I don't know. I think we'll agree to disagree.
To me, the American identity is as toxic as Israeli, and I think, it's all got to go.
Okay, we can have a whole another show about that.
Yeah,
Indi, thank you so much for joining us.
us.
We're going to let you get some rest. I appreciate all the viewers for watching. We will reconvene on next week, Tuesday. Thank you very much. We'll see you then.